April 28, 1945, Moravia. A cold gray morning hung low over the battered countryside as smoke drifted between the ruined farmhouses. The war was collapsing, the front was dissolving, and every surviving German tank crew knew the end was only hours or days away. And deep inside this dying battlefield, a single Tiger II sat motionless behind a shell-torn barn, its long 88mm gun pointing uselessly into the mud. It was broken. Shrapnel from a Soviet artillery barrage had struck the barrel earlier that morning, cracking the muzzle. The crew had argued about retreating, but their commander, a calm, broad-shouldered 24-year-old named Kurt Knispel, simply shook his head. Retreat? There was nowhere left to retreat to. The engine ticked softly as it cooled. Outside, they could hear the distant rumble of Soviet armor. Dozens of tanks pushing toward their position, boots trembled on the Tiger's floor. The gunner cursed under his breath, running his hand over the cracked metal of the cannon. A broken gun, a dying army, and an enemy that outnumbered them 10-1. But Knispel wasn't like other tank commanders. Even the men who outranked him said he had something different, some instinct, some supernatural feel for the battlefield. They joked he could smell enemy steel the way a wolf smells blood. The Soviet tanks were getting closer. Inside the Tiger, the crew looked at Knispel. "Commander, our gun is finished. We can't fire accurately. One shot and the barrel could burst." He didn't respond. Not yet. Instead, he slowly opened the commander's hatch, pulling himself halfway out into the icy air. The wind whipped his hair as he scanned the horizon through his binoculars. And then he saw them. 5 T-34/85s advancing in a tight spearhead formation, engines roaring, green hulls gliding between burning houses. Their turrets swung left and right as they searched for targets. They hadn't spotted the Tiger II hidden behind the barn. Knispel took a long breath. He knew this moment might be the last he ever lived, but he also knew something else. A broken gun wasn't useless, not if the target was close, dangerously close. He dropped back inside the Tiger, his voice low and steady. "Driver, prepare to move." The crew stared at him in disbelief. "Move? With a cracked barrel? Commander!" But he cut them off. "We're not retreating. We can still fight. We just need to get close." The Tiger II growled to life, the Maybach engine shaking the ground. Smoke coughed from the exhaust as the 70-ton beast crawled forward. Outside, the 5 Soviet tanks were fanning out, tightening their formation, ready to punch through the last German line. They still didn't know death was moving toward them. The Tiger crept between the ruins, inching around the side of the barn. The cracked 88mm barrel glistened with soot and mud. The gunner braced his shoulder against the breech, sweat running down his temple. "Commander, if we fire at range, the barrel will explode." Knispel nodded. "That's why we won't fire at range." He pointed ahead. "Wait until we're so close the barrel can't flex." The gunner swallowed hard. "How close is that?" Knispel didn't blink. 40 meters. The loader froze, hand still gripping a shell. The driver whispered, "That's suicide." But Knispel's voice was calm, too calm. "This is the only way." The Tiger II rolled forward, treads crushing broken bricks beneath it. The Soviet tanks were only seconds away from seeing them, and then they did. The lead T-34 turned its turret sharply, spotting the massive silhouette coming out from behind the barn. A burst of machine gun fire rattled against the Tiger's armor like gravel. Another T-34 fired a high explosive shell that burst against a wall beside them, showering the Tiger with debris. Now the Tiger was fully exposed. Every Soviet gun pivoted toward them. Inside the turret, Knispel raised his hand. "Gunner, Target the lead tank. Wait for my signal." The enemy T-34s revved forward. 40 meters, 35, 30. The Tiger shook violently as another shell slammed into its side armor. Sparks flew inside the hull. The loader gripped the shell tighter. The gunner lined up the shot, sweat dripping into his eye. Knispel's voice cut through the chaos like ice. 25 meters. Hold. Hold. The Soviets didn't understand why the Tiger wasn't firing. They thought the German crew was panicking. They thought they had the kill. They were wrong. At 20 meters, Knispel slammed his fist down. Fire! The Tiger's damaged cannon erupted with a deafening crack, flame bursting from the cracked muzzle like a torch. The entire tank rocked backward as the shell tore from the barrel, and in an instant, the lead T-34 vanished in a ball of fire. The loader was already ramming another round into the breach. The second T-34 tried to turn its hull. Too slow. The Tiger fired again. Another explosion. Another kill. But now, the remaining 3 Soviet tanks were circling like wolves, trying to get behind the Tiger's vulnerable rear armor. The driver threw the Tiger into a tight pivot, treads grinding, mud flying as the 70-ton monster spun to face them. Before we continue, tell me where you're watching from in the world. Now, back to the battle. A third T-34 appeared directly in front of them. Too close. Both tanks fired at the same moment. The Soviet shell slammed into the Tiger's turret ring, jamming the rotation. Metal screeched. The gunner swore, "We can't turn." Knispel grabbed the driver's shoulder. "Then we turn. Full right." The driver yanked the controls. The Tiger heaved to the side, the cracked barrel swinging toward the next target. The loader slammed another shell home. "Fire!" the Tiger barked again. And the third T-34 erupted, turret blown clean off. The last 2 Soviet tanks panicked, reversing and trying to escape the ambush. Flames reflected on their steel as they backed down the ruined road. Knispel wasn't done. "Driver, forward!" The Tiger lunged ahead. One of the fleeing T-34s crashed into a wall while trying to turn. Its track spun uselessly in the rubble. The Tiger's gun fired again. 4th kill. The final Soviet tank broke and ran, engine screaming as it tried to escape down a narrow village lane. The driver was shouting in Russian, the crew terrified. They had just watched 4 of their tanks die in seconds, to a Tiger with a shattered cannon. They never made it out. Knispel lined up the shot, dangerously close now. The barrel crack widened. The gunner hesitated. "Commander, another shot might—" Knispel didn't let him finish. "Fire!" The Tiger's 88mm roared, louder than before, a sound like the sky tearing open. The cracked muzzle flared, the barrel shuddered, but the shell flew true. The last T-34 exploded in a fountain of fire and steel. 5 tanks, 40 seconds. The Tiger fell silent. Inside the turret, smoke hung in the air like ghostly fog. The crew stared at one another, stunned, unable to process what had just happened. Their gun was barely holding together. The Tiger's armor was dented, scorched, and smoking. But they were alive. And 5 Soviet tanks were not. Knispel slowly opened the hatch, climbing out into the cold air. The wind brushed ash off his uniform. Behind him, the wrecks of T-34s burned like torches across the ruined village road. But the battle wasn't over. Moments later, a Soviet anti-tank gun hidden in the tree line fired. The shell punched into the Tiger's hull. The world went white. The Tiger II belched smoke and flame. Its armor, thick as it was, could not save them this time. Kurt Knispel, the deadliest tank ace in history, was thrown from the turret. He died moments later, surrounded by the wreckage of the last tanks he had ever destroyed. But even in death, his legend only grew. Because this final stand, this impossible moment where a Tiger II with a broken gun shredded an entire Soviet spearhead, became one of the most astounding last-ditch tank actions of the war. Knispel had already achieved over 160 confirmed tank kills. But it was this battle, this final 40 seconds, that cemented his name forever. His crew survived long enough to tell the story, and when they did, one thing became clear. He didn't fight for glory. He didn't fight for medals. He fought for the men inside that tank, the brothers who trusted him, even when the gun on their Tiger II hung broken and cracked. In the dying days of a collapsing front, Kurt Knispel proved something extraordinary. A machine can fail. A gun can break. An army can fall apart. But a warrior's instinct, that rare, almost impossible battlefield intuition, can still change the outcome of a moment. And in those 40 seconds, on a ruined Moravian road in 1945, Kurt Knispel showed the world that even a broken weapon in the hands of a master can rewrite history. That was his legacy, his final message written in fire and steel. And long after the smoke cleared, the wrecks rusted, and the war ended. The story of his last stand still echoes through military history, a reminder that even when everything is lost, one last impossible act can still be carved into legend.